Will Kyler Murray's arrival mean a TJ Hockenson explosion? I don't necessarily think so, and I don't think that's what we want. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. Today on the show, it's been a while since we just kind of deep dived Kyler Murray thing. Been kind of letting that marinate a little bit over the draft, but there is one topic that I didn't really discuss a lot in March, which was the tight endness of it all. So as it goes, and it's a question I've gotten a lot of mailbags and stuff, and I haven't had a very in-depth answer. So today I want to in-depth answer the question: does Kyler Murray's propensity to target Trey McBride mean that we can expect the same kind of production increase from TJ Hockenson? My answer is going to be no. I don't think that's what this is about, and I don't think we want that to be the thing that happens. For reasons I think you can do a little bit of arithmetic in your head and realize. I don't think that this is like a Kyler Murray likes tight ends because he can see the tall receiver kind of thing. That's the like vibe of that I get. I've seen a couple people say something to that effect. I think that's way oversimplified. But I think without trying to explain it, the idea that Kyler Murray has had his number one most targeted player in each of the last 3 years has been Trey McBride. And so the logic, it's easy to logically try to follow, and therefore he will target the tight end a lot. Maybe not the number one, right? Justin Jefferson exists, but that the tight end will increase. So there's a couple of things that I want to describe about what that could possibly mean, what it meant in Arizona, and what translating that to Minnesota is going to look like. But for one, we just need to talk a little bit about Kyler Murray and how he will fit into the Vikings offense. This is another major Kyler Murray question, and something that I could maybe even dedicate a whole thing by going concept by concept by concept. But just watching through what he did in 2025, which was only 5 games. So that's a small sample, but it's also a manageable one. So, you can do these kind of quick and dirty, just, hey, take a quick look at things. And looking at, so I actually just watched the first 2 games down because those were the 2 games that I didn't use for previous Kyler Murray content. So I figured I'd get a couple that I haven't looked at all. And the fact that they were the first 2 was also very helpful to me. It was the first game was against the Saints in the Superdome. The second one was at home against the Panthers. And them being the first 2 is helpful because that is going to be the purest form of what Drew Petzing and the Cardinals of 2025 intended to do with him. Where, once you get deeper in the season and guys get hurt and you got to figure something out and you get a weird matchup and then you got to deal with Jacoby Brissett. Everybody's got to change everything. So by week 13, your game plans are super different because you just figured more out. But I wanted to kind of answer the question okay, Drew Petzing had an offseason to think about how 2024 went. How did he go into the 2025 season? What did he intend to do? How did he intend to make an offense out of a Kyler Murray-led team? And the answer was, I think, a disappointingly high number of screens and manufactured touches. That is not necessarily what I wanted, but that is a way to get the ball in Trey McBride's hands. And a ton of this funneled through Trey McBride. Look, the Cardinals in the last 3 years, Trey McBride's probably been the best receiver on the Cardinals. Because DeAndre Hopkins is long gone now. And I just doing target share, right? From 23, 24, and 25. DeAndre Hopkins was not on the Cardinals for those or wasn't in the target share. And the other options are Hollywood Brown, no thank you. Rondale Moore, rip, but not the kind of guy you want to have be your target share leader. And Michael Wilson, who's a wide receiver 3 at best. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the only other person who like should be the number one target getter. And that might also be feeding into this idea. Well, maybe it's Kyler Murray just preferring a tight end instead of this guy that was supposed to be the next big thing at wide receiver. But I kind of think after watching a little bit too much Marvin Harrison Jr. for my own good, I do think that there are some pretty critical issues there that are preventing him from really taking that next leap into wide receiver one. And we'll see if he can put something together now in year 3. But I get it. Like, in that offense, McBride is a better passing option, bar none. That's just a better guy to throw the ball to right now than Marvin Harrison Jr. because Marvin Harrison Jr.'s, he's had his drops issues and he had his miscommunications. He had a lot of situations, and I remember this from last time where he would just read things incorrectly. He would just, there's a lot of these concepts that are now universal to the NFL that are, hey, if you see single high, do one thing. If you see off coverage, do something else. And, you know, all these if-thens, and the quarterback and receiver are expected to be on the same page about all of it. And you see Murray just launch some ball, nobody's home, and you know that Marvin Harrison did the wrong thing. You can tell by the body language. Kyler Murray's throwing up the shrug. Marvin Harrison is not throwing up the shrug back. That means everybody's on the same page about who screwed up here. And so there might just be this thing where he like didn't trust Marvin Harrison, and he may be pretty justified in doing that. But that is one counter theory that now runs away from this idea that he just likes tight ends. But that's not even the point I really want to make. That's something that matters, but it's not the point I really want to make. It's more that Kyler Murray likes the first read. He really likes the first read. I don't know how this matches up like league wide. I know there's stuff like the PFF QB annual that like attempts to chart all this stuff, and I don't know where he lands in those kinds of studies, but just to my eye, just to my subjective, vibes based eye, I see Kyler Murray a lot favor in situations where it's like arguable, whether you want to dump it to the first read or move on. He kind of always goes to the first read. He is a lot more reticent to move on with the progression if the first read is like arguable. This is an entirely subjective thing on whether or not it's correct to do that. But he's somebody that seems to be, hey, if I can get the ball to this guy, I'm going to get the ball to this guy. Even if I maybe shouldn't, even if he's a little more covered, I'm going to put it up. I'm going to trust my receiver because that's the first read. That's where the play wants to go. You will definitely find schools of thought that think that's stupid. You will find schools of thought that say, yes, absolutely fantastic. If you can get it to the first read, get it to the first read. Not a thing really worth passing judgment one way or another on, but it's something that's worth keeping in mind that if your progression is going to be to favor a certain player and have that player first a lot, then that player is going to get the ball a lot. And that leads me to what I think is the slam dunk here. If you look at Kyler Murray's entire career, his top target getters were Larry Fitzgerald, and then in 2020, DeAndre Hopkins, and then in 2021, Christian Kirk. I think Hopkins was hurt for a bunch of that year, I think. 2022, it was Hollywood Brown with DeAndre Hopkins close behind. And then 23, 24, 25 were all Trey McBride. So really, until Trey McBride, it was always a receiver, and it was always the person who was seen to be the number one receiver at the time, and they had injury issues, so it couldn't be D-Hop as much as they wanted it to be. But I would say, and this tracks with my film, and this tracks with everything, so I feel pretty like this explains a lot of the statistics. Kyler Murray likes to have a number one. Kyler Murray wants to have a dude who's that dude to throw to. Whether that was Fitzgerald in his first year, whether that was DeAndre Hopkins for many years, and now it's Trey McBride. So who's that guy going to be in the Vikings? I don't think we're going to get different answers to that question. So instead of saying, ooh, he likes tight ends because of all this McBride stats, he's going to be a tight ends guy. No. He's going to be a Justin Jefferson guy. I think that Kyler Murray is exactly suited to be the kind of guy that wants to over-target Justin Jefferson, which ain't so bad a thing. I mean, he's Justin Jefferson, right? Like, we want to throw in the ball 10 times a game all the time. Justin Jefferson's first in the progression a ton, way more often than anybody else. He's somebody that is going to get the implicit trust of Kyler Murray, so whether he's open or not, Kyler's just going to heave that thing up. And he has a pattern of doing this. And really, if you look at this from a target share perspective over his career, there's most of the time, except in years like 2022 where they dealt with injuries, most of the time there's three main pass catchers that comprise more than 50% of the targets. Last year, that was Trey McBride, Michael Wilson, and Marvin Harrison. It was the same group in 2024. In 2023, it was Trey McBride, Hollywood Brown, and Rondale Moore. Michael Wilson didn't quite make the cut there. He was a pretty close fourth, though, so maybe there's 4 guys. And, hey, the ball spreads around eventually to everybody. Everybody's fullbacks got 2 targets here on this, in these like pie charts. But if you want to just look at target share and like use it as a proxy for QB preference, he likes to have 2 or 3 guys. And I think it's pretty clear who the 2 or 3 guys for the Vikings can be: Jefferson, Addison, Hockenson, and whatever of Jawan Jennings you want to throw in there. So 3 or 4 guys that are going to be the primary people. That is pretty universal to most offenses. I don't think that that's like a thing that's very unique about Kyler Murray, but it's something we can probably hang our hats on, that he is going to have his faves and he's going to be a little bit overly deferential to throwing the first read when the first read is at all remotely there. So what does that look like concepts wise, and does it map on to Kevin O'Connell? Let's compare those 2 offenses next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Indeed. Your workplace is in chaos. It always is, and you always have a million things you got to deal with. And then there's that job you got to fill, that hire that's been sitting there on your desk forever. Let Indeed sponsored jobs help speed up the process and loosen things up. They will put your job in front of the right people for it: skills, experience, location, and make sure that your job is presented to people who actually fit it. And you're not just hoping that the right candidate happens to wade into the wheat field of jobs and stumble upon yours. Here's the stat that says it all. In the minute that I'm talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. If you like these kind of in-depth conversations, you want more of it, head on over to the Locked On Vikings Everydayer Club. There's a special Discord there where we can cut it up about whatever you want. You can ping me whenever you want. It's $5 a month or $50 for a full year at lockedonvikings.supercast.com. Not to mention, you get everything Locked On Vikings does ad-free, no interruptions. Go check it out. Let's move on, and let me talk a little bit schematically now about Kyler Murray and how that fits onto the Kevin O'Connell offense. And then by doing so, we can, that's another huge question about Kyler Murray. So it warrants bringing up here, but it also will help us kind of discuss where the ball's going to go a lot, how a market share is going to work in this offense. So the Drew Petzing offense did have McVay style concepts in it. They did run Y choice like a bunch. Because their tight end was their superstar. So of course they did. They ran, Bo and regular choice. And, I saw flag and I saw all these, McVay style concepts that Petzing had clearly co-opted and worked into his own offense. There was also some other stuff that I personally didn't recognize, but it felt McVay-ish. It was very, spatially motivated. It was very like, you could tell where the ball was supposed to go versus every kind of coverage and all that stuff. And it probably was a McVay, it felt like a McVay concept. And it's probably one that I just didn't know because I don't know them all, right? So I would say that from a scheme fit perspective, there was a quote, and the whole reason I did this was because of this quote from Kevin O'Connell when they first signed Kyler Murray, was about him saying, hey, he runs a lot of those concepts that we run. And when you look at him and the concepts that we run, the results are really, really great. And I kind of wanted to check in on that. And I only did a couple of games, but in those couple of games, at least, what Kevin O'Connell said super checks out. Absolutely follows from what I was able to look at. The best things that happened in Kyler Murray's first couple of games, at least, happened, especially in the ones that were meant to go to tight ends. So this is maybe a point in the other column that kind of disagrees with my original thesis, is that the best stuff happened in plays where everybody went deep and it was supposed to basically open up space for Trey McBride. And the Vikings have those plays for TJ Hockenson as well. Why choice? They've converted some 3rd and longs with it. But the other stuff that I thought went really well was when there were these more spatial pure progression things. on bow and choice return and, flag stuff and all this stuff, or choice flag. That's what I was trying to write. I don't know why I wrote choice return in my notes for that. And in these kind of drop back plays, that's what's best for Kevin O'Connell's offense. Now, the play action side of Kevin O'Connell's offense, which is a lot of rollouts and movement and stuff, not as much good stuff happened. However, I would want to really look at more of this and study it as its own thing, which was not the point of this particular exercise, but I would want to look at it more because the play action rollouts, there weren't that many, probably just for game plan reasons against those particular teams. But they were all kind of messy for execution reasons that were outside of Kyler Murray. You had a blown protection, you had bad routes, you had really bad, the receivers of the Cardinals drove me absolutely insane every time I have watched Kyler Murray. And Marvin Harrison's supposed to be better than that, and everybody else is not getting it done. So he is dealing with some absolute nonsense, and it's a lot of why he'll have to scramble and run 25 yards, right? Because there's just nobody open downfield, nobody can win. And manning up the Cardinals seemed to be something very successful on at least these couple of games. Seemed to be something they could do very successfully. So I don't know. You put a pin in it. Call it a TBD on the actual under center rollout play action stuff. That's not something that the Cardinals had him do a lot. And this is maybe one of the central debates that there has been about Kyler Murray, right? Well, how's he going to do if he can't play under center as much as Kevin O'Connell wants him to play under center? And I'm not 100% sure that that's true. I'm not going to put my eggs in that basket just because that's the way Drew Petzing worked with him. And because he doesn't have a ton of experience under center. Yeah, that's probably not going to help to not have that much experience, but it wasn't like he couldn't throw on the run, and it wasn't like he couldn't do the rollout footwork, right? I want to know the reason. Why is he bad at play action and rollouts and stuff? And a lot of times he can turn those into scramble drills. So that's something that's helpful anyways. I'm not ready to close the book on that particular chapter of the playbook just yet, but I want to look at it more closely. So put a pin in it. We'll just set it aside for now. And then the other schematic thing that I noticed, and I tried to make a note, and I just had a separate category of concepts because I was trying to chart this out. And I didn't try to chart all the different shot play and deep concepts they had, whether it was four verts or Mills concepts or, shot plays with big posts over the middle, heat or something like that. Whatever it was, if it was a deep concept and I tried to define that by everybody's got a 10 or 15 yard route. Everybody's going, this is going to be we are going for a chunk play here. And maybe there's one outlet check down or something like that. And I just put those into their own thing. This is where the results got really bad. This is where the worst stuff happened. You took dumb sacks. This is where he would get into scramble drill trouble, heave up a stupid interceptable pass. This is where you would get some of the worst misses. There were a couple of things where he did hit it when he did hit those concepts, but he didn't hit it enough for me to feel like it's worth it. If I were a QC coach in the Arizona staff after 2 weeks, I probably would have put together a recommendation to pull away from some of these longer developing plays, because the other thing is the Cardinals couldn't protect it. The receivers couldn't get open. Bunch of these weren't his fault. I would not go as far as to say Kyler Murray is bad at, deep concepts or anything like that. It just didn't work for the Cardinals for one reason or another. And what I think that did is it put Kyler Murray into improv situations where he's not as good as he thinks, where too many bad things would happen there. And he would always want to go scramble. Sometimes he would make the play. Sometimes he'd break the pocket. He'd get downfield, or, he'd find some sweet throw on the run to do and be this awesome play. And then sometimes it would not be there and he would force the issue. And that's when really bad stuff would happen, or he would just straight up take a sack holding the ball. That's where all that dumb stuff would go down, right? And that's not always his fault either, right? Guard gets beat immediately, you take a sack, that's not on you. So I would just say that those long developing plays, whenever they came up, seem to be problematic. And I have a concern with that because we know Kevin O'Connell loves those long developing plays. So I would love to see Kyler Murray be a little more consistent on those longer developing, 5-step drop out of shotgun, hold the ball, hitch, and trying to be a little bit more consistent on those. He also had some pretty nasty misses in those. On one of them, he actually missed a check down. That's rough. And he would be a lot more like here's the deal with Kyler, and I brought this up before, but I'll bring it up again. This is why I'm concerned about Kyler himself on these concepts, even though so many of these plays weren't necessarily his fault. The concern I have with him, contained to him, is his ability to hang in the pocket when the time is just going. Not necessarily pressure. Once he feels that pressure, he gets out of the pocket, he can respond to that, he does his thing, right? But rather, if there is no pressure, he either is going to be, the clock goes off and he's got to go anyways, and now he's suddenly bailing on a clean pocket. Or what happens more often is he will drift. He's so used to having to throw on the run and throw under pressure and throw in these messy situations that he'll just take 2 steps and then heave something off platform. When really he could have just sat there, waited, been patient. And that's the thing that I identified before that they're going to have to figure out. That they're going to have to get Kyler Murray to be able to hang calmly in the pocket without getting his feet out from underneath him. That's the key, is the footwork and the base that he throws off of. If he can sit there in a long developing pocket, and let's just say for the sake of argument that they block it up and there's no pressure, if he can sit in that situation, stay on his base, and then deliver an accurate ball when it's time to, then you got a stew cooking. But without it, that's where you can kind of tap into all of Kyler's worst habits, where he wants to drift into trouble. He wants to run out into, make a scramble drill where it didn't need to be, and now it's harder to execute. This is where you get into turnover zones. He gets bad with, he gets unclean with football, right? Like gets messy with his ball security, or, throws up a ball he shouldn't throw up, and now it's an interception, or like all those bad things that really undid the Cardinals at key moments. And I remember a couple of them from the last time the Vikings played the Cardinals, which was in 2024. Remember that game with that comeback? That's when the worst, Kyler Murray does the worst stuff and throws up that interception to Byron Murphy Jr. to end the game. That's where you don't want to do that. And I would just avoid it the most I can, but I don't think Kevin O'Connell wants to. And I don't know how that is going to get together. That's the real schematic thing that I'm worried about. But I'm definitely not worried about the under center or is he going to have a tight end to throw to or any of that other stuff. But back to the tight end of it all with TJ Hockenson. What can we expect from him moving forward? That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. In the NBA playoffs, down to the last 4 teams. And if you're looking to get even closer to the action, FanDuel has a great offer to get you started. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Turn $5 into $150 in bonus bets just for getting started. And you can do that by, say, shorting the San Antonio Spurs. If you're a little mad, put $5 on the Oklahoma City Thunder minus 245 money line for game 1. If they win, you get your 150 in bonus bets. You can also look at some Vikings bets now that you can bet on week 1 already in FanDuel. Now that the schedule is out, you can bet on things like the Vikings to actually make the playoffs. That's plus 180. If you want to put that down right now, put $5 on whatever it is you're confident in, and you can turn it into $150 in bonus bets if that bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Moving on with the Locked On Vikings podcast, there's a key difference between Trey McBride and TJ Hockenson. And I'm not familiar enough with Trey McBride to know how he is as a blocker in the run game. I didn't watch any of the run game for the Cardinals for obvious reasons. We don't have James Conner on the team. But they really, really, really loved him as a receiver, right? They love to split him out wide. They love to use him. This was not a tight end like Hockenson that's going to be like in line all the time. Hockenson gets involved in the bunch sometimes, but you're not asking that guy to play true wideout the way that the Cardinals asked Trey McBride to. But I don't want to oversell it. This is not Mike Gesicki. McBride was still mostly doing the routes that you would expect a tight end to do. He was running over the balls. He was running choice. He was running, shallows and stuff and slants and the kinds of thing. He's not the one running the deep post or anything like that. Some teams will have their tight end do that if they're fast enough. This is something we saw like Oregon do with Kenyon Sadiq because he runs a 4.37, right? You're not asking him to do that. So piling all of that together, there are a ton of in Petzing's offense. This is where I'm gonna speculate. There were a lot of these concepts looked to me like they were developing short to long and in to out. So the first thing that develops, the first route is going to be the shortest one, right? It's the shortest, it's the fastest, it's going to be the one that's ready first. So that's your first read. And then your second read is the second thing that breaks, your third read is the longest, third thing that breaks, you go short to long, right? Versus the kind of old Cowboys, Air Coryell, Norv Turner, touchdown to check down idea, which was a different kind of philosophy of offense. The and I would say the Vikings lean more toward that, but the Cardinals they were short to long. Look, they had O-line issues and their best player was their tight end. So of course they wanted to go short to long, right? And so that meant that Trey McBride was the first read a lot. And if he was the first read and he was getting the ball, if he was the first read and it wasn't blanketed, he was getting the ball and that was the end of it. For the Vikings, the first read might be a little longer sometimes. Kyler's going to have to hang in there and do it sometimes. So is he going to just come off of that and just dump it off to his tight end and maybe Max Bredesen leads the team and targets one of these games? Have like a CJ Ham and Soldier Field disaster like the Truth to All Rumors game from 2019? Probably not. But Hockenson, there are a ton of plays that the Vikings do use that are meant to get the ball to Hockenson. Y choice is the big one. That's the one that I think is the most often, but a lot of their concepts have him, as the second or third read. Or he's usually later in the progression though, because he does run the route a little bit slower. And this has become more prevalent in the last couple of years as he's slowed down. He's getting a little older. That he is not going to be the first read because it takes him longer to run that route. So it's going to break right around when you get to your third read, and you just change the progression to kind of facilitate that. Or you can change the progression to facilitate that, or you can just kind of change what routes you're asking him to run. So you're not asking him to do the first read thing necessarily. And the Vikings don't want to go short to long. And the other thing is in to out, right? We call this the triangle read. This was a big Kubiak thing in the Kubiak years here. And it's universal. It's universal to like all offenses. The triangle reads where you start with the person over the ball. That's the first read, and that's the tight end. So again, a lot of times he would get the ball and that would be the end of it. Everything else that happens isn't there. But if they squeeze it, if linebackers squeeze down, he's double covered, you're not going to get the ball. You then basically pick a side depending on which linebacker vacated their space more. And then you would have a high-low over there and it would make a little triangle between over the ball, the high and the low. And that's a triangle read. So I think there was a fair amount of that. It's, again, hard for me to tell. I'm totally guessing and speculating based on just where Kyler's eyes went in these and just trying to kind of deduce, that looked like a triangle read to me. So don't quote me on that. But that's what it seemed to me to look at. That's not how Hockenson gets used in the Vikings. He is part of a grander plan. He's just kind of one of the guys in the progression a lot of the time. And in order to create that illusion of complexity, that, McVay thing that Kevin O'Connell's been preaching ever since he got here, and Kwesi did too when he was in charge. In order to create that illusion of complexity, you basically have a bunch of situations. It's not unlike the way Flores does stuff on defense. You have a bunch of formations and route concepts, and depending on where you're aligned, that tells you who's going to run what route. Not, okay, the tight end is always the dig in this one, or the tight end is always the arrow in this one. Not necessarily. Sometimes the tight end is the arrow, or is the dig, and Justin Jefferson is the arrow, just to throw him off. And so it's really easy to, hey, whoever's the innermost person in this stack, when we're in this formation, you're the one running the arrow when we call this play. But that's impossible for a defense to pick out. And they can't say, if, Jefferson and Hockenson are in a stack, Hawkinson's going to be the short route and Jefferson's going to be the long route. A defense would love to be able to bank on that information, but they can't, because we do it the other way around just often enough to keep them honest about it. And that means that sometimes Hockenson is a deeper route and he's third in the progression. And it means that a lot of the other decision making about this is designed to make sure that whatever concept we're in, Jefferson is running whatever route makes him the first read, or maybe the second. So he's going to be the first read most often, or Addison will be the first read a lot too. So I would guess, based on all of this, that the first read gets the ball when it's Justin Jefferson, and Kyler knows who 18 is. That's not going to be a deterrent for him. So I think that when we see whatever version of this Kyler offense that we see, it's going to be a lot of funneling through Jefferson, at least to start. And then maybe it'll have to adjust as defenses react to that, right? But it'll be a lot of Jefferson Addison right off the bat for all of these reasons. And then Hockenson, it might be harder for Kyler to get the ball to him, and he might be there more as an outlet, as a safety blanket. He might be in as a blocker quite a bit, depending on how the health of the O-line holds up and all that stuff. So I'm not expecting like a huge jump in market share for TJ Hockenson. If you're in this, watching this thing for fantasy reasons, and you finally got to the end and you want the conclusion, I don't think you should treat Hockenson as a better fantasy asset than he was last year's draft or the year before it. I do think Jefferson and maybe Addison will increase more instead. And honestly, if we're just taking a step back and asking what would we prefer, I want that. Give me the more Jefferson offense. I want that one. Whereas more Jefferson, more Addison, get the ball in the hands of these quick guys. And then the tight end is there to do what you need him to do. And that's what I've always defended TJ Hockenson's role as, is he is whatever the thing needs. There's a glue to it, right? Hey, you need an extra blocker, that's going to be Hockenson. You need some underneath route, that's going to be Hockenson. You need somebody to run a dig to pull the linebacker away, he can also do that. And not all tight ends can do that. Hey, you need someone to double team the end, he's going to be in on that with the tackle, and he's going to get his hands dirty, right? That's what I think Hockenson has been, and that's why it's so hard to pick out his role, because it's so different every play, and it doesn't always mean production, and it doesn't always mean flash. It doesn't always mean eyes are on him, right? There's some humility to it. And so I've always defended Hockenson's role as utility, as being what you need him to be, right? Josh Metellus of the offense. And I think if you think of it that way, it justifies like the investment that they made in him more often, which I personally have no issue with. I don't think they overpaid. I think they got back what they want out of that. And the reason is just because there are other guys who are the front man of the boy band here. It's okay for there to be one, but you need a bass, like you need a bass player. There's the front man and the lead singer that everybody talks about. There's the Haley Williams, but you need the drummer too. And that's what I think that is worth paying for, to have a good one. Because if you don't have a good one, the whole thing falls apart. Okay, I will talk to you all tomorrow. Mailbag tomorrow, so get your questions in. That is going to be, the description is going to be in the show notes. I will talk to you all tomorrow, and as always, Skol.